Good morning. I would like to call the joint committee meeting of Senate Finance and Assembly Ways and Means to order. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Senator Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Senator Hammond. Senator Kekeffer.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Sorry.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Severs Gansert.
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
And Chair Brooks.
Here. Thank you. Please mark the member, Senator Hammond, present when he arrives. I would like to remind the committee members that if they have any questions or want to be recognized to speak, to please put it in the chat of the Zoom meeting that we have today, and I'll try to catch you as soon as possible. And I also would like to remind the committee members to mute their microphones when they're not speaking. And for the public that's participating today, if there's any public comment at the end of the agenda, on our agenda, there are the public can join the meeting and be recognized and make comment or leave their opinion on the website. And if you can't, on the agenda, the information necessary to do that, or on the legislative website's Nellis portion of it, there's a banner at the top that walks you through the process to make public comment. With that, we have a very short agenda today. We have 3 budgets from the Governor's Office of Finance. We have the Budget Division 101, Division of Internal Audit, or excuse me, 1340, Division of Internal Audits 1342, and then the Special Appropriations from the Governor's Finance Office 1301. And with us today, we have Director Susan Brown, and who will be starting the presentation. Director Brown, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Greenemeyer. I'll be sitting in for Director Brown.
Oh, great. Ms. Greenemeyer, if you're ready to start, go right ahead, please.
Show screen. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Tiffany Greenemeyer, Deputy Director for the Governor's Finance Office, and here with me is Warren Lohman, Administrator for the Internal Audits Division. Here's the agenda that we will be going over today. And on slide 3, this is the Governor's Office vision and mission and values. This is for your information. Moving on to slide 4, the Governor's Office, this is what makes up the Governor's Office budget accounts: Budget Account 1301, Special Appropriations, 1340, Budget Division, 1342, Internal Audits Division, and 1325, Smart 21, which will be heard at a later date. On slide 5, it shows us the organizational chart. This is for your information. Starting on slide 6 is Special Appropriations Budget Account 1301, which has 4 enhancement units. And I also included the Nevada volunteers for your information, as this is in the base budget. So E225 requests funding for transition costs for newly elected constitutional officers, $70,000 in the second year. E226 requests funding for Civil Air Patrol, $25,000 in the first year for hangar rentals, equipment repair, and maintenance. E276 requests funding for Nevada Governor's Advisory Council on Education relating to the Holocaust. This is $100,000 each year, the biennium. And then moving on to slide 7 is E277, requesting funding for graduate medical education grants for $4,265,000 in the first year, which brings a total funding of $8,530,000 in 22. This funding is being requested in the first year of the biennium to allow grantees to have 2 years to expend the funds without interruption. We have recommended that there be language added in the Appropriations Act that allows the program to balance forward within the biennium. Moving on to slide 8, this requests funding for one-time appropriations for the construction of the medical school at UNLV in the amount of $25 million. And with that concludes budget account 1301, and I can answer any questions that you may have, and I do have representatives on these programs.
Thank you, Ms. Greenmeyer. And were you gonna? I guess we'll go to 1301, and then if we have any questions, we can go 1340 and 1342. But I think most questions are going to be coming from 1301 anyhow. So you started where I think most of our interest will be. We do have one question to start off with, Chair Carlton.
Very much, Chairman Brooks. So this is very, very familiar. So I think as far as the graduate medical education goes, if you could expand upon that just a little bit more so that the newer members of the committee understand what we're exactly trying to accomplish. And I'm just curious, you're talking about balancing forward. Are there any funds that are left over now that need to balance, that are coming back? Was all the money expended last time?
I believe all the money has been expended for the 2021 biennium. It shouldn't be coming back. I will have to ask, I have Brian Mitchell with us that can explain.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Chair, we've done this for a number of cycles now, and it would be nice to know where we are, what our success rate is, just kind of get a general feel for where we are with this one right now.
Okay. Brian Mitchell, can you answer Ms. Carlton's questions, please?
Happy to. Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Brian Mitchell, Director of the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology, and our office administers the Graduate Medical Education Program. For a brief history and overview of the program, back in 2014, then Governor Sandoval convened a graduate medical education task force, and this task force took a look at the recommendations that were coming to fund the UNLV Medical School and other ways that other methods the state could take to increase the physician workforce in the state. And for those of you who don't know, the way this works is that when you graduate from medical school, doctors then need to do a residency program, and depending on the specialty that they are interested in, they also do a fellowship following their residency. And so everyone has to do a residency in order to become a licensed and practicing doctor. And in Nevada, we have fewer residency slots than other states. And so often our doctors who graduated from medical school had to leave the state in order to be able to practice medicine, in order to find a residency program. And so our statistics show that that physicians are more likely to practice where they do their residency than where they do their medical school. And so we found that we were losing a lot of doctors to other states because they were going there for either because we didn't have the residency capacity, or they were looking for a specialty or a subspecialty that they couldn't find here. So starting in 2015 and through this year, you at the legislature have funded funding for graduate medical education. And we have used those funds to pay for startup costs for either new programs or to expand slots in existing programs. And we have funded thus far 141 slots in to 24 grantees, and in 14 different specialties and subspecialties, ranging from family medicine, OBGYN, and internal medicine, to things like pediatric emergency medicine and geriatrics and pulmonary. And so thus far, the program has been very successful so the reason that we are asking for the permission to balance forward funding within the biennium is that these programs take multiple years to create, 3 to 4 years to create. And so being able to have the money up front and then be able to spend it over the biennium will allow the grantees the time that they need in order to build their programs and in order to become accredited by the accrediting bodies. And so I think, Assemblywoman Carlton, did I answer your questions, or is there any other information you would like?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Mitchell, you said 141 slots. I believe we're getting to the point where some of our students are graduate. How many of them are staying in Nevada? The whole goal was to get them to stay. How many of them are staying?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Carlton. Typically, over the last 10 years, the UNR School of Medicine Office of Statewide Initiatives does a survey of graduates, and roughly a little over half over the last 10 years have stated that they plan to continue in Nevada and practice here. And then some of those who leave, some of them are leaving because they are pursuing further education, so specialties or fellowships and subspecialties that we don't offer here. And then others are leaving for either financial or family concerns. But we are keeping about, I think, a little over half of them. And I can provide the exact number to your staff after the meeting once I look at the updated survey.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, Mr. Mitchell, I mean, we're putting money towards something to get people to stay. So I think we really need to analyze, is this where the dollars need to continue to go? If only 50% are staying, let's figure out why and see if we have to address other issues. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. And I want to build upon that question, Mr. Mitchell. So you said that based on a survey over a 10-year period, we're showing about I think it would be really important to look at, obviously, the trend in the last 3 years, and what's happening with folks who are doing some sort of a residency here in the state based upon this program, since this program's really only been in place for about 4 years, I think it sounds like. And so obviously that data showing a trend, if any, is in the last couple of years is the most important for us.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks. And what I would say is that the programs that we it typically takes 3 to 4 years to create these programs. And so the programs that we just started, that we created at the very beginning, that we funded in 2015, 2016, are probably just coming online now. And then most residency programs are between 1 and 3 years. And so I think we're just starting to see the fruits of our efforts here.
Thank you. That reinforces why that data will be so important for us. So will keep us posted. I have a few more questions, and I'll start with Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. Obviously, this is near and dear to my heart since I'm a product of graduate medical education here in Nevada. It says I did my family practice residency in Nevada because it was available. And obviously, I stayed in Nevada. I think we need some more, I would like a lot more details along the same line of questioning that Assemblywoman Carlton asked. I think this is a high-level view, but we really do need to see what those numbers have shown. You mentioned on slide number 7 that I see a carryover of 0 for the 2023 year. Can you explain why, number 1, there would be a 0 there and that figure on slide number 7? That's my first question, and then I have a few more if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
So,
You want me to answer this, Brian?
Please do. Thank you.
The reason why we have a no carryover in to 22 is because the plan is to expend the funds that are currently available completely.
can you look at that slide again? Because it's 2023 and it says 0 there, so it's not going to be refunded. Could you clarify that? At least that's what I saw.
Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, because we didn't put any funding in for fiscal year 23 because we put all the funding in fiscal year 22 to have the ability to carry over into 23.
All right, providing you're allowed to do that, correct?
Yes, provided that we're allowed to do that.
Well, how much of that fund do you expect to? So my concern is that we don't have a clear picture of this at all. You say that there's 141 slots that have been funded, but yet that it takes 3 to 4 years to stand up a program. And just to be clear, it's never a 1-year residence. It's going to be 3 to 4 years and maybe a fellowship that might be a year. But how many are in the pipeline to be started of these, in addition to 141 residence slots that are already being filled? Because we're talking about being anticipatory, new medical school, more students. Where are these slots?
I'll take that one. Brian Mitchell for the record. If this is funded again, then we would begin to solicit more applications for funding and to start new programs. And so the funding that we're asking for right now is not to continue funding for any previous program, but it's rather for the startup costs for new programs to add to that 141.
Great. And so this is, if I might carry along, Mr. Chair, on the same question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So can you tell me how many slots we already have? This is additional new funding, this 141 slots. How many slots did we have before then? I mean, I'm an old doc. I graduated in here in the 80s, early 80s, from medical school in 81, then did my residency, finished in 84. So there were already slots. How many existing slots were there before the additional 141 slots? Because we're not seeing what this whole global picture is here.
Brian Mitchell for the record. And if I could clarify your question, are you asking for the total number of slots in Nevada, whether they have been funded by the legislature or not?
So, correct. So a follow-up thing that would, I think, be helpful for all members of the committee and the chair would be how many. We certainly have more than 141 residencies right now in Nevada. So I'm curious about how many do we really have in Nevada? This was an additional 141. that I'm understanding. So that would be one thing I'd like to see. And the next thing is we have a list here of who have received the funding, but that's not a clear picture either, because you have UNLV Med School, Turo, which is a private institute, Valley Health System, Southern Nevada Health District, UNR Medical School, Mountain View, and Southern Hills Hospital. But I don't think that's a full list. I mean, I think there's additional entities and hospitals that receive funds already, some in the north and some in the south, but I'm not seeing that on the list. And so I'd like to see maybe a better understanding of what we really have access to here in the state and what we are funding in addition to this fund, because I just think this is just a narrow picture of what we have. And finally, my last question would be, when you give us all that data, if it's okay with the chair, you know, you said 50% stay in Nevada, and that's one professional unit of the medical school. It'd be nice, sir, if you could also say how many of the PAs, because there's other things. This healthcare issue is huge. We have such a disparity and low outcomes in our whole global health outcomes for minorities and lower income, and we're trying to fix that in the state. I'm tired of being 50 on these healthcare disparities, and part of our solution, and members of this committee have been on for a while, we know that we funded to try to fix that and produce more providers. I'd like to see how many of the PAs that we educate stay in the state, how many of the dentists that we educate, how many of the nurses, not just doctors, that stay in the state. So it's not the budget, but I think it's helpful to know how we're spending our money, and that because it affects all these other budgets that we have, healthcare outcomes, the fact that we don't have Medicaid providers. And so I think we need a much better overview of what we really put in to healthcare education in the state, how we support it with our funds, and then how many of those folks stay in Nevada. I mean, I want to see our successes or the failures and what we can do better. And this little window is just so narrow over the global picture. So sorry I'm ranting a little bit here, Chair Brooks, but this is so key to us getting out of the bottom 50 of all these healthcare disparities, is where we're spending our money in healthcare education, especially in providers. So thank you for ranting. Let me rant a little bit, but these are honest, good questions, I think, for the state of Nevada. And with that, I'll get off my soapbox and sign out. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Titus. These are important questions. Obviously, today we're limited to this particular budget and this particular program and what it's trying to achieve, but you are so right, and this is just one piece of it, and the more data we can get, the better. Next, I think we have Assemblyman Levitt has a question on this budget.
I guess just to preface, I'm new, and so I'm trying to wrap my arms around this, and I see where the medical program is getting substantially more money than any other program. My question is when we're funding these other programs that have been funded in the past, one that popped out to me was 3 Square. Is it a situation where we're not dedicating funds towards those programs? Is it because they didn't request funding, or did we decide not to fund those programs because we wanted to dump more money into the medical schools, or how does that work? When you're making your decision on what we're funding and what we're not. So I guess it's just a broad question.
Tiffany Greenmeyer for the record. Mr. Mitchell, can you answer this question, please?
Brian Mitchell for the record. Assemblyman Levitt, I believe, I'm not sure I understand your question, as you're asking about why different things like 3 Square was not funded this time around. And perhaps Tiffany, was 3 Square something that was funded out of this budget account in the past?
No, it wasn't.
I'm not sure what your question is, sir.
I'm gonna interrupt here for a second. Assemblyman Levitt, are you referring to the other decision unit, the other units beyond 277? Because I think E277 is what we're talking about on the G.
Oh, I apologize. I was just focusing on all the programs under 1301. I thought we were talking broadly about.
Yeah. No, so I understand. I think where you're going. So you're talking about E225, E226. E276 in addition, as opposed to E277. And you know, Ms. Greenemeyer, if you have, I think that's where Assemblyman Levitt was headed.
So I'm not aware of any 3-4 squared requests at all that came up in the GovRec. So we put these requests in, like Civil Air Patrol and back to the slide. And transition costs for newly elected constitutional officers, and that's pretty common during when you go through an election year. And Nevada Governor's Advisory Council on education relating to the Holocaust. Those were requests by the governor. And these are ongoing that were put in enhancements to bring back in. Does that help answer your question? I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
I guess my broad question is, when we're talking about any 1301 special appropriations, is there an effort to fund everyone who requests funding, or do we make the decision, hey, we're not going to fund this, or we're not going to push funding towards this program because we want to make sure that something else is funded? And just how that process works is basically what I was getting at.
Well, we fund everything that we can, based on the requests that we do get. I believe that 3 squared was requested in 2018, but do not believe that it was requested again in the 22-23 budget.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for helping me clarify the question.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Thank you for the question. And I think we have a question from Senator Severs-Ganser, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm looking at 1301, and there was a whole list of one-shot funds, I think, that are no longer in the budget, but sometimes those get worked out later as they rise to the top. So regarding the GME, like Dr. Titus, I would like more information. And I understand the information somewhat compartmentalized, but if we just start with GME to figure out what there was, so maybe it's a 5-year trend, what actually how many residencies there were, and who were sponsoring them, and then how many there are now, and where those 141 are, so that we can get to the total. So what have we added? Where are they? How much do they cost? I also saw in our notes that money that's not expended in 22 can be rolled to 23. And I don't know if you're going to want to consider not having reversions, because I think it's well understood that it takes years to start up these programs, and we want to make sure that the issue about when the money is actually spent doesn't hold us back, so that we can provide the money needed to get them started and approved, because it's a very long process. So mostly I was interested in sort of the accounting of the slots, and then the reversion, whether this should be one of those funds that's not necessarily reverted at the end of biennium, so you could roll between years and not, and also not reverted at the end. And I would agree, I think, with my colleague that this is critically important on a couple of levels. It's important for providing health care in our state, but also I think healthcare is one of those sectors where we have a lot of room to grow from an economic development standpoint and a diversification standpoint. We've got some outstanding entities within the state. One of them was on the one-shot list, I think the Ruvo Brain Center, and a variety of others that can really help us rise on a national level on the healthcare front. So it's about training residents in our state, keeping them here, but also expanding on healthcare more broadly from an economic standpoint. So I would appreciate if you can get back to us with more details on the residency programs. And then again, looking beyond that, the nurse practitioners and would be another mid-level provider that I think we're funding, and also the physician assistants too. Thank you. And I know that's not your budget, but overall, if we can get that kind of data compiled, because it is compartmentalized. Thank you.
Brian Mitchell, for the record, happy to help provide that data.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I don't see any other questions on this budget right now. If you wanted to jump back into, Ms. Greenemeyer, if you wanted to jump back into the other budgets.
Tiffany Greenemeyer, for the record. Next slide is slide 9, the budget division, which is budget account 1340. The budget division is responsible for developing and presenting a fiscally sound executive budget for the executive branch of state government that reflects the governor's goals, as well as providing oversight to state agencies by implementing the legislatively approved budget and enforcing most of the provisions in Nevada Revised Statutes, Chapter 353. Other responsibilities include monitoring and forecasting state revenues and supporting the Board of Examiners. The budget division is entirely funded with general fund dollars and has 21 FTEs. Moving on to slide 10, we are requesting one enhancement for a temporary contract position in the amount of $25,000 in the second year for the biennium to provide support during the governor's recommend budget process. And we also have a one-shot appropriation for the continuation of the upgrade for the Nevada Executive Budget System, NEBS, in the amount of $422,000. This was approved in the 2019 session, and we deferred a portion of the upgrades due to the budget reductions in the 31st special session, Assembly Bill 3.
Committee, I apologize for the interruption. This is Broadcast and Production Services. Ms. Greenemeyer, I think you may need to reshare your PowerPoint with us because we're not seeing the slides.
Okay. Can you see it now?
We cannot see it now.
Can you see it now? Okay.
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
So that will conclude my presentation on budget account 1340. Can I answer any questions you may have?
Ms. Greenemeyer, I don't think we have any on 1340. If you move on to 1342.
Okay. Moving on to slide 12, budget account 1342, internal audit division. The division performs internal audit functions by reviewing state agencies. They perform training, internal control reviews, and post-audit reviews of agency transactions for compliance with state laws and regulations. The division has a staff of 13 and is funded 100% general fund. Moving on to slide 13. This shows you the performance measures. This is for your information. Moving on to slide 14. Internal audit has two enhancement units. E132 requests funding for an external peer review for the standards of internal auditors in the amount of $13,500 in fiscal year 22. The statute requires the division to adopt the standards of the Institute of Internal Auditors, IIA, for conducting and reporting on internal audits. IIA requires an external assessment to be conducted at least once every 5 years by a qualified independent assessor or an assessment team from outside the organization in order to continue conducting and reporting on internal audits in accordance with IIA standards. The next external peer review is required to be completed within fiscal year 22. The next decision unit, E710, is replacement equipment, and which is in accordance with Department of Administration Enterprise Information Technology Services replacement schedule. Moving on to slide 15, division is requesting a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $81,972 to cover an anticipated personnel service shortfall. The shortfall is due to term leave payout and budget reductions in the personnel service category. And with that, that concludes budget account 1342. Can I answer any questions?
Ms. Greenemeyer, I do not see any questions from the committee on the last budget 1342. I appreciate your presentation this morning and the questions you answered, and as well as Mr. Mitchell, the questions you answered for the committee. And last call, committee, for any questions on this. Oh, I believe Assemblywoman Carlton has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. So this is not in relationship to any of the budgets. That's why I saved it until last. So if you go to page 5, the Governor's Finance Office, the organizational chart that's there, I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions because the work that this office has done over the interim, I know you and I spoke a number of times, all the interim finance meetings that we had last session, this last interim, this office had a lot on its plate. And I was just looking at the chart, and it seems to me that with the CARES Act money and all the other responsibilities, and we know there could possibly be future dollars. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think it would be wise for us to plan, between Ms. Brown and Ms. Niedermeyer and all of their staff. It just seems to me that when I look at this chart, there seems to be at least one box missing, maybe two, as far as making sure that all of the issues that the state is going to have in front of it for the next 2 years to be able to give them the folks that they need to process all of the work programs that might be coming forward. I mean, we're not out of this thing yet. And we didn't realize last session what we were going to be facing. So it never was a train of thought to add more folks in. But we now know what could possibly be coming. So, Ms. Niedermeyer, I'm sure I do not want to put you in a hot spot in answering this, but, as far as how this has gone, could you just kind of give us just a snapshot of, how this actually works, and when all these work programs come through, what does that workload really look like for your staff and the budget officer 2s and 1s that have to deal with all these, and what you had to go through last interim to get all that work done?
Yes, Tiffany Greenemeyer for the record. Yes, it's an incredible amount of workload with our 1s and 2s. The process is they get these work programs and they go through the executive branch officer 1s, and then they move on to, it funnels into a lead, and we have 5 teams, and each team has a lead and 2 executive branch budget officers 1s. And so that all funnels up into the lead. And then like the DHHS team, it's probably about 80%, maybe 85% of the work program load. And so that team gets pretty well overwhelmed. And then adding on the additional CARES Act money and work programs, it's pretty overwhelming, a lot of overtime this time around. We did have to hire 3 contracted positions just to get us through it.
I think what I'm looking at, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is the way it funnels towards the top and percolates up. It seems like it goes to either your exec officer 1, yourself, or Susan. So it looks like pretty much, or Ms. Brown, I apologize, that was inappropriate, Ms. Brown. It seems like that's an awful lot to go through just a couple of folks at the top also.
Yes.
Be able to review it all and then to get it to us.
Yes.
Timely fashion.
Yes, it is. Both Susan and I, Dr. Brown, we both work a lot of hours, more than 40, to get it done. When IFC comes around, it's definitely a lot of work. I can say that, funneling up to both me and her.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I think as we move forward and the possibility of other dollars coming into the state, I think we should have a conversation. If we're going to end up having to go get contract people and overtime, I think we really should take a look at what resources are needed to be able to support this office so that they can get the information to you, chairing IFC, so that we can get things processed in a timely fashion. I don't think the workload's going to get any lighter over the next 2 years. So I think we really should take a close look at that to see the best way to go about accomplishing that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Greenemeyer and to Ms. Brown and to all of your team, thank you. When I looked at the books for IFC, I couldn't imagine what you guys were going through at the same time. So I really appreciate all the work that you did last interim to try to make our job a little bit easier. It was a team effort and you guys did your best and we really thank you for it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Carlton. Yeah, this pandemic and through this IFC process has really shined a light on how lean our state government is and how difficult it is for, finance office, for the legislative council bureau's fiscal staff in both houses and IFC, and it's every branch of executive government. We are a very lean operating state, and when things go wrong, it is incredibly difficult to adapt to them. So I appreciate your all your hard work as well, Ms. Greenemeyer, and your entire staff. I do have a question from Senator Hammond. Senator Hammond, please go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, Mrs. Greenemeyer, and I meant to get this in when we were talking about budget 1340. You had the one-shot appropriation, that $422,000. You had mentioned that it was as a result of a reversion, or basically there was a shortfall later or earlier in the budget from last cycle. The 1422, does that bring you back to what your original ask was, or is that the original ask plus?
Tiffany Greenemeyer for the record. It was kind of muffled, so I couldn't quite hear the whole question, but I believe you were asking if this was the whole ask to bring us whole again. And yes, it is. This is the $422,000 was the portion of the NIBS upgrade that we gave back, and we're just asking for that back to continue on.
Thank you. That was what I was asking, whether or not it was the whole amount or the whole amount plus a little bit more.
I'm sorry, Tiffany Greenemeyer for the record. Yes, that is correct. It's just for the amount that we gave up.
Thank you.
Well, Ms. Greenemeyer, I think that is all for questions. for these budgets. I appreciate your time this morning and your staff for putting together this presentation and walking us through it this morning. So I believe that is the end of our budget agenda items, which brings us to our last agenda item, which is public comment. And I'd like to, BPS, if you could make sure that the public comment lines are open. If anybody is on that would like to make comment, and we'll give them, let's give 1 minute in case there's a lag and difficulty getting on.
Thank you, Chair. Broadcast standing by. Caller with the last 3 digits, 423. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 423. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Great. Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, and there are no additional callers at this time.
Thank you, Broadcast Services. We appreciate that. I believe that that brings us to the end of this committee meeting for this morning. And our last item would be to adjourn. And we'll see you in subcommittees tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.